So, thank you all for joining me today on Strategy Sunday with Dr. Ken. I am your host, Dr. Ken Richmond, a board certified psychiatrist, veteran, and corporate leadership coach. I help corporate leaders pinpoint their leadership issues so they can develop thriving workplaces with less turnover, improve workplace morale, and increase organizational performance. Strategy Sunday is our way of coming up with a term, a word that we can apply to our workplace, our relationships, or just across the board, and seeing how we can, find out some ways of how we can use it in our life to make things better or to improve our current situation. Right? So today's topic is the R word, managing pushback. So as usual, I start off by getting my audience to give me their take on what that letter, the word that starts with that letter could mean. So as usual, keep it PG and PC. So let's see what our guests my audience comes up with today. So we have respect, responsibility, responsiveness, all good ones. We have resistance. We have, hey, Doc, we have reflection, rapport, reliability, resilience. All right, so we have some very, very good contenders here. The one that is going to win this time, hey, Kay, Dr. Mashika, and Susan. So Susan is the winner. So Susan got the word. Yes, today we're talking about resistance, managing pushback. So our word today is resistance, managing pushback. So resistance, as we'll define it today, is the attempt to prevent something by action, argument, or attitude. Those three A's again, right? So the attempt to prevent something either by someone's action, an argument, or attitude. And attitude is not just always something negative, it's just a disposition that individual may have. So earlier I put in the post up above, what's common between a 6-year-old who does not want to attend their first day of school and an employee with organizational knowledge who now has to report to a manager who recently graduated from college. Can we see how that situation or those examples can create elements of resistance? If anybody agrees with that, let me know what your thoughts are. Hey, Monica, thank you for joining. Yeah, so let me know what your thoughts are. A 6-year-old doesn't want to go to school. An employee with over 15 years of organizational knowledge, right? So that's an experienced employee who now has to report to, let's say, a very junior, younger manager who recently graduated college. Can you see how some resistance can come up in situations like that or that relationship? Right. So we're going to touch base on some tips of how we can overcome those things. But let me know what you guys are thinking. Let me know. I mean, we had some good words, good suggestions here. Reflections, rapport, reliability. What else we had? We mentioned responsiveness, respect, responsibility. So all important words, especially in the workplace and in any relationship for that matter, right? Any relationship. Dr. Mashika says, no one wants to report to a younger manager. While that may be true, the reality is they may have to, right? If an organization is, truly functioning based on, merit and credentials and those kind of things, and still value and experience. So it is a kind of a nice balance that they have to play there. It can create some very interesting situations. And that's where we come up with Strategy Sunday, so we can talk about some of these very important elements in the workplace, also in our lives, but sometimes we don't even talk about it. So that's a strange kind of concept, right? It's important, but we don't talk about it. What else are we hearing? Hey, Dr. Erica, thank you for joining. So Amber says, the story of her life, dealing with resistance. Resistance is there, right? So Susan says, absolutely, the same type of behavior. When people don't know how to behave, they revert back to childlike behaviors. Absolutely. So that example of a 6-year-old and a very much a mature adult, they can always regress back to behaviors that can be seen as immature or childlike. And as you know, in the workplace, you can't have childlike behaviors happening because it really disrupts the kind of the milieu that you're trying to foster and the productivity in the workplace. Again, can affect how the morale, the productivity, and obviously turnover, because nobody wants to deal with childlike behaviors, especially in the workplace. Okay, so change is constant, right? Hopefully we all believe that change is constant. Change is the one thing in life that is constant. Usually when I tell my patients that, they're like, they take a pause. They're like, really? I think what they're trying to do is really trying to identify some other truth, some other statement, or that they can use as a counter argument to me telling them that. But change really is the one constant in our life. It is always present. I mean, look at our hair. Our hair is always growing or turning gray, uh, hopefully distinguished gray. But there's always change happening. Our bodies are changing. The climate is changing. Okay, that's a whole other concept. I should not have introduced that. However, facts are facts, right? Change is constant. The second thing I wanted to identify in terms of background to talking about resistance is that within organizations, we see change as, in theory, being easy to implement, right? We want to, merge these two departments. So let's just merge them. Let's just, eliminate positions, merge positions, or create new positions, and everything should be fine and dandy. However, that's not always the case, right? Because in reality, when it comes time to execute a change process or a change plan, it doesn't play out that way in the real world, right? So even though we craft it, it looks great on paper. When we apply it to people, and people are varied in terms of how they perceive change. They are varied in terms of how they perceive and receive information. So all those things we have to think about when we're trying to implement change, even within our life, right? If you want to work out, for example, and you say you're going to get up every morning and do it, the level of resistance you have to overcome to leave your bed, to go out, to know that you're going to get sweaty, hopefully healthy at the same time, right? That's a level of resistance that you have to overcome mentally. You have to communicate or have somebody hold you accountable. There's a lot that goes into that. It's not just, I'm just going to put on some clothes and go to the gym or go for a run. For some people, it's easy. Others, not so much, right? So what are my guests? I keep calling you guests because you are my guests. What are some of the comments that my audience members are stating? Let's see what we have here. So we have Dr. Khadijah. Thank you for joining. You are tuning in from the ER, so I appreciate you taking the time to not only take care of the patients, but to get spend some time with me on this Sunday. Let's see who else we have. Myra says she's right. Okay, yes, people do revert to childlike behavior. So Myra was echoing some of the points that Susan made. What else do we have? What other thoughts do we have so far about resistance and the workplace, or even just relationships, how we're navigating those things? Look here. All right. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about the 3 tips as I see them, the 3 tips, right? And then the 3 strategies, right? So the 3 tips and strategies to manage the pushback. So 1 is to expect it. 2, roll with resistance. And 3, communicate transparently. Okay, again, they are expect it, roll with resistance, and communicate transparently. So what do I mean by expect it? When you expect resistance, basically you're looking for instances where a change initiative has been launched. You're looking for changes in behavior, so low motivation, a sudden drop off in engagement in the workplace. Okay, also poor quality of work that may be submitted. So what's a strategy to combat that? What's a strategy? What's a tactic we can use? So 1 is that you want to listen to what your people are saying when you launch that change initiative, when you attempt to change the status quo, right? By doing so, you get to be better prepared to manage it. Again, you can't manage what you don't know, right? I've said this before, so I'll say it again. People complain about the things that they care about. If they're complaining and nobody's listening, you're missing the mark. All right. So again, people complain about the things that they care about. The second tip, you need to roll with resistance. And that's a kind of a concept that comes from a form of therapy modality called motivational interviewing. Okay. This is how you're trying to get somebody to move into a new state of being, a change process you're trying to initiate. I would say this, that even the greatest idea will have trade-offs to consider. And those may be trade-offs that you did not even anticipate, what we call those blind spots. We're thinking, oh yeah, this will be a quick change. Everybody should be on board. However, when you implement it, you realize that's not actually the case. You're going to get a lot of pushback. So people have increased resistance to change. Why? Because of fear. Am I going to lose my job? Is the department going to go belly up? Is a company not going to have its identity? The one that the one that was there when I joined the company. What is that going to look like for me? Like if those things are not clear to that employee, it creates a lot of fear. And as you increase your fear, you also increase your resistance. Okay. So going back to that 6-year-old child who does not want to go to school, right? How would you roll with resistance? I can tell you most parents, they don't say, well, like let me rephrase that. Some parents may say you're going to go to school no matter what, right? To that child. Another approach would be, hey, so what's going on? Why don't you want to go to school today? Is there something physically hurting you? Is there something going on? Right? Is there somebody hurting you at school? You try to investigate that. You take a position of curiosity. And that's literally how you roll with the resistance. Think about it, in the clinical world, my clinical world, if I'm talking to somebody about their drinking or that there are concerns about excessive alcohol use, I may say something like, okay, so you came to this visit because of, concerns related to your alcohol use. Can you tell me more about that? Do you see it as a problem? Because that's usually your first step. If that person doesn't see it as a problem, how can we then get them to get on board with whatever change initiative we're trying to put forth to them, right? They may say, no, I haven't had any DUIs, no public intoxication charges. I show up to work, my productivity is okay. So by their standards, everything is fine. But when it comes down to it, they're drinking 24 beers, a night, a week, right? Those are extreme numbers, but people are able to consume that much alcohol, believe it or not. So rolling with resistance would be something like saying, hey, you know what? Can we come up with a plan to reduce how much you're drinking? Ultimately, we'd like for you to be resistant or less resistant to the recommendation that we're making. We'd like you to be abstinent from it eventually, if that is a ultimate goal, a realistic goal for that individual. But we have to roll with the resistance. We can't expect that, hey, you're drinking too much, the next day they're going to stop, because there are a lot of negative things that can happen as a result of making that change happen so fast without an appreciation for the consequences of doing so, right? So the strategy to help roll with resistance is to always identify your key stakeholders. Who are your senior leaders, right? Who are the managers or frontline supervisors who will now need to implement the change process and manage the change process? Again, resistance, as we define it, has to deal with action, arguments, and attitudes. So if your leaders are not of the same mindset or are not on board with whatever change you're trying to implement, that is going to be perceived by folks on the junior levels as not being important, and you're going to get more and more resistance. So the third tip is communicate transparently. Sounds self-explanatory. You want to tell them what you're doing, and you want to tell them in a manner that is very clear. You may entertain questions, but in a moment you want to be able to articulate what that change is going to look like. So you avoid confusion in your messaging by stating the reason for the change, how current operations would be, could be, or will be affected, how jobs, responsibilities, how are those roles, how are those things going to change, if at all, right? And how is that change going to either hopefully lead to better market positioning for that organization? A family who has to leave from one city to the next, how does that help with, maybe it's a job opportunity, maybe it's a better financial position that they're trying to be put into, right? But leaving friends, leaving your core support system, leaving family who may be in that home area, that can cause a lot of resistance. I don't want to go. I don't want to go. Why do we have to go? You have all this resistance coming up, okay? So again, you have to appreciate what's going on, but communicate your intentions very clearly. So the way we do that is to welcome input from all levels within an organization. Be clear and honest about what sucks, what's going well, what's not going well. State how aggressive you want to be with your timeline, right? If you want a merger to happen in 3 months, kudos to you. That may or may not happen, right? Or if it does, you will have a lot of casualties along the way who may not be on board with that strategy or that time frame, or that timeline. Okay. Be frank about what you know and what you don't know, right? Again, we talk about fear, anxiety, stress. The more unknown elements you have in that person's life, that employee's life, that organization's life cycle, you're going to have a lot of resistance coming up as a result of that. Okay. So again, you involve your key stakeholders. I can't emphasize that enough. Involve your key stakeholders. And in doing so, you want to identify a champion for that change initiative. That person who can articulate the cause, who can push forward, who can be the face and the voice of not only the corporate entity or leaders, but also the junior employees within the organization. Okay. In my book, Mental Blocks, A Concise Corporate Guide to Employee Mental Health, I talk about elements of power, referent power, legitimate power, right? Those are, individuals who you may want to select based on that attribute or those attributes that they may have within your organization to put forth a very strong and a very fruitful change initiative and being able to successfully manage resistance. Okay. So again, those are my 3 tips and my strategies as it relates to resistance, managing pushback. Let's see what some of my comments have been. So Myra says transparency with simplicity. Absolutely. Hey, Marlene, thank you for joining. Susan says the key is to give people 2 choices. It makes them feel in control and you get a better outcome. Absolutely. The more you have on the menu, the more you have to choose from. Sometimes that can get confusing. How many times we go to McDonald's and we watch the menu, which probably hasn't changed in years, right? And we stand there, we're like, what are we going to get? We stand there for a while, right? And then ultimately we said, oh, just give me a number 4, right? After all the contemplating, we just picked the one thing that we're comfortable with. So the more choices we have, the harder it is to make a decision, right? What did Dr. Kadisha says? Yes, the morning workouts, much resistance to those. I totally agree. If you don't have a support partner or somebody to motivate you, an accountability partner, things can be tougher to get going. All right. So again, those are my tips for today's broadcast of the R word, managing pushback. I appreciate anyone who shared this broadcast with somebody who could benefit from hearing about it. This is Strategy Sunday with Dr. Ken. I am your board certified psychiatrist, veteran, and corporate leadership coach. I help corporate leaders pinpoint their leadership issues so they can develop thriving workplaces with less turnover, improve workplace morale, and increase organizational performance.